Today, we welcome back a guest we had on our program a few months ago, Dr. Stephen Linton, the founder and chairman of the Eugene Bell Foundation. Founded in 1995, the charity works to provide medical humanitarian assistance to North Korea, specifically in the treatment of drug-resistant tuberculosis. Dr. Linton returned from a visit to North Korea earlier this month, and he has graciously come on our show to tell us more about the current situation. Thank you for coming back on the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
So you've recently returned from
Yes.
North Korea. I mean, you were there, you go twice a year, I believe. How
Yes.
have things changed in this last visit that you went?
Well, we spend most of our time at tuberculosis treatment centers and don't really do a lot of sightseeing, so it's hard to comment on what else is going on. Most of these centers are in remote areas. But our program continues to develop. We started a new pilot project that is testing a mechanism that would allow for early detection of multi-drug resistant TB and therefore early treatment. We'll have to see how it goes when we go back in the spring.
So there hasn't been the situation with your treatment centres hasn't gotten any worse or better, considering that sanctions at the moment are very strict, and I understand sometimes you've had difficulties at getting through the equipment and things that you needed in the last few months.
Well, medications have never been sanctioned. So the basics for treating multi-drug resistant TB have never been an issue. But we've had a project for developing isolation wards, prefab isolation wards for patients who need inpatient care. And those were caught in sanctions as of last December. But today we heard that our application for a UN Security Council sanctions exemption was approved. So now that project is back on track, we really have no issues with sanctions for the time being.
So yes, let's talk more about that. So today you just issued a press release saying that the UN Security Council has confirmed your request to be given these exemptions. I mean, can you tell us more about that?
Well, in December of last year, a new level of sanctions was announced that mentioned prohibitions against metal. And there were various interpretations of exactly what that means. Theoretically, all humanitarian aid-related issues are supposed to be exempt, but the Republic of Korea and the People's Republic of China took the position that the new sanctions regulation would prohibit anything made out of metal. So obviously, if you're sending in prefab patient wards, you have a metal roof, you have metal doors, that sort of thing, a heating system. All of these were a problem. So we asked the Sanctions Committee for clarification, and they published some guidelines in August. And we applied again in September under the new guidelines, requesting specific for a clear exemption for the exact items that we are supposed to ship. And it took a while, but they approved everything, including the heating systems and the roofs and everything else. So now we're back on track.
That must be a huge relief for your efforts.
Huge relief. Because multi-drug resistant TB requires, particularly at the early stages, requires constant caregiver attention. These people are given a shot every day. There are 6 drugs. Some of them have serious side effects, which mean that the people need side effect medication. So, and many of our patients are very, very ill. So they need a warm, safe situation where they can be treated until they are less of a threat to the public, until they're no longer coughing up TB germs. And the patient wards in North Korea, for the most part, have halls, which means that a coughing patient's germs will migrate from room to room and into the halls, and as a result, caregivers get sick and patients exchange germs, and it can be a bigger problem than anything else. But now we can send them wards that have all the doors open to the outside and yet are warm enough and safe and comfortable enough to make a patient want to stay, even in the wintertime.
It must have been, though, quite frustrating to get to this point because there were these sanctions and you're offering humanitarian assistance, which should be exempt from these sanctions, but because the rules were unclear as such, it's been a battle, must have been.
It's been a battle. I think one of the problems is that, particularly recently, this term humanitarian assistance has been expanded. And many international organizations and large NGOs and even small NGOs are providing what they call capacity building or developmental assistance. And they call this humanitarian aid. But the intent of these programs is to make life better for people, which is certainly nothing wrong with that. But genuine emergency aid is not necessarily to make life better, it's to save life that is in danger of ending. And our program falls under the category of emergency aid, life-saving aid, because our patients, many of them will die within 6 months, probably all of them within 3 years or 4 years, if they are not treated with the right medications. So I think pulling this term back apart, where a distinction is made between life-saving aid, which no one, including the U.S. government or anyone, objects to, and developmental aid that can look in a certain sense like economic aid, has been the challenge. And gratefully, the parties involved have apparently come to a conclusion that there is this difference, and that our needs to ship emergency aid should be respected.
Do you think the current positive atmosphere involving relations with North Korea has helped you get these exemptions?
No, if anything, I think it has made it more of a challenge, because there are fundamental differences in policies toward North Korea now among the major players. There was a time when, for the most part, humanitarian assistance was handled by international organizations. And the Republic of Korea governments were largely opposed to all international aid and prevented South Korean NGOs from participating in these programs. And the U.S. was sort of an honest broker, and many times the U.S. government helped us get permits in South Korea that we needed to continue our program during the previous administration. So this was the arrangement. Now these players are changing places. And every time you have, which is good, South Korea is now much more, the ROK is proactive. They're moving in. They want to move into a leadership position in terms of North-South relations. But as main players change places, you create vacuums. And one of the vacuums that has been created due to this dynamic is tuberculosis. You see, the Global Fund has pulled out this year, probably not that eager to re-engage because South Korea is engaged. In other words, everyone is looking to the Republic of Korea to play a leadership role in humanitarian assistance. Not that the international organization will not be engaged, but they don't have to play the kind of role they played before. And yet, as yet, the Republic of Korea has not stepped into the humanitarian aid vacuum that has been created by the change of places.
I mean, there are some small steps perhaps being made by the South Korean government so far. They held medical talks just recently, which is the first time in 11 years that these kind of even talks about medical exchanges has taken place. What do you make of the fact that South Korea are making these steps so far?
I think it's a great idea, but the clock is ticking. Global Fund medications, TB medications, will begin to run out at the end of next year. In our experience, the medications that we use and the Global Fund used were ordered from the Global Drug Facility. And so we were basically ordering drugs from the same place. And based on our experience, it can take 9 months between the time drugs are ordered and the time they're delivered. So that means that to fill the vacuum that will be created when the drugs from the Global Fund are no longer available, those drugs need to be ordered in March. And again, my concern is not that the ROK government and the DPRK government are not concerned about this problem, but that in the sort of changing of places and the restructuring of this problem, that there'll be a gap before they're able to come to an agreement to address this issue before the drugs run out.
Some hardliners and hawks would argue that the sanctions are there to put pressure on North Korea to denuclearize, and that any exemptions, even for humanitarian assistance, would ease that pressure and run counter to what they're trying to do by putting pressure on North Korea. What would your response be to such an argument?
These are people who don't really make a distinction between emergency aid, which does not help economic development, which is never intended to help economic development, and developmental assistance, which is the expanded version of humanitarian aid. And I think even the most hardline person would probably agree that to save the lives of people who are dying of an infectious disease, and in that process to try to decrease the increase in infections with using minimal resources in country is not going to make one difference in whatever the intentions of sanctions are. If anything, these kinds of programs generate goodwill, which I would assume is not of no value to the people who are interested in sanctions.
But then they might also be concerned about how do you make sure that the money or whatever equipment is going into North Korea is being used for those humanitarian purposes?
Well, for one thing, we don't use money. These are TB-specific medications and supplies that are shipped in. Our delegations register and ID every patient. We meet with every patient every 6 months. We get sputum samples that give us a clear picture of whether their treatment is effective or not. I would say that our program is probably as intrusive as any program on earth, and the results of the treatment bear out the fact that it is transparent, because our cure rates are 25% higher than what the normal world cure rate is. And this is not just by guessing, it's by actually testing sputum samples. We can tell that we're achieving these levels. And so I think the mechanism for delivery and the results or the impact of that delivery is without beyond question. Then what you're left with is, well, our delegations have to stay in hotels and eat food while they're in North Korea, and it's hard to argue that the amount of expense that we spend in country is going to make any significant difference at all in North Korea's economy. I think it's ludicrous to even suggest that.
That's probably a fair point. Then let's look ahead now. What is next for Eugene Bell? Now that we have this sanctions exemptions waiver, what's your next step?
Well, we're grateful that we can now send these isolation wards, which will help us concentrate patients so that we can enroll more people. But frankly, the latest statistics from the WHO suggest that there are 8,000 new MDR cases created each year. Our program only enrolls 1,200. The WHO, or the Global Fund program this year, are targeted an enrollment of 1,000. So put us both together and you've got 2,000 plus people in an environment where 4 times that many people or more are coming down with this disease and spreading it before they eventually die from it. So obviously our first priority is to enroll more patients, and we have this pilot project to help with early detection and early treatment, and obviously this is a huge interest for us. The other thing, though, we're going to need is that you have to process sputum, you have to fix machinery, The machinery we use to diagnose MDR-TB has to be connected to the internet. All of these things are very difficult to do in North Korea. So we've been pushing for many, many years for dedicating a small portion of the Kaesong Industrial Complex to build a laboratory, to build a warehouse for medications, to make sputum transport to the laboratory overland possible, medication transport possible, and all this. And I think it could be done, again, in a way that it absolutely minimizes economic impact on North Korea. On the other hand, it would make a clear demonstration that at the end of the day, we are putting people first, the lives of ordinary citizens first. And so we're going to try to push for expansion, and we're going to continue encouraging a transparent, non-economically related investment in infectious disease control using, hopefully, the facilities available in the Kaesong Industrial Complex to allow the Koreans to get together, even under sanctions, before sanctions are resolved, to start working together in resolving infectious disease issues, which affect both societies.
Well, we have to wrap it up there. Thank you for coming in today, and congratulations on your United Nations ruling, and we hope you all the best for your work as well.
Well, thank you very much.